I remember in 2006 we woke up in the morning and we had 2 Israeli tanks and a bulldozer. They kept us in a room for 3 days without food or water.
You know, what they did in Shifa Hospital, they went and destroyed all the laboratories. They went and destroyed the scanners. The ultrasound machines with the cables have been severed to make them unusable. The generosity, the care they give us is just limitless, and yet they are the ones who are in far more danger, have such a persecuted life compared to us.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Veritas Podcast with myself, Zayn Ahmed.
And myself, Ali Manji.
Today we're honoured to be joined by 2 guests. We've got a special episode for you. We're joined by Professor Nick Maynard, an upper gastrointestinal surgeon from the University of Oxford, where he has been doing a lot of humanitarian work across Palestine, which we'll hopefully get into a bit later on. And we're also joined by Tareq AbdalJawwad, a medical student registered at Al-Azhar University in Gaza. So it's an honour to have you both on. Thank you so much for joining. I think to start with, it would be nice to actually hear a bit of a background for both of you. If we start with you, Professor Maynard, with a bit about your background, about what brought you into the world of surgery in the first place.
Hi, so thank you for asking us along today. I'm a surgeon. I've been a consultant surgeon in Oxford for 28 years now. And I started my training in surgery at Guy's Hospital, where I'd done my clinical studies. I loved surgery as a student, and my father was a surgeon, so I'm sure that in some way connected. We were not particularly close. My father had left the family home when I was very young. So, but I'm sure at some level, clearly his influence had an impact on me. I'd been exposed to surgery and I loved it, and I loved it as a medical student. And perhaps most importantly, I was inspired. I'm a great believer in having mentors, and I've spoken to my trainees over many, many years about the importance of mentorship, and hopefully I've been a mentor for many people as well. But I was hugely inspired by my main mentor, a surgeon called Bill Owen at Guy's Hospital, who was a general surgeon, upper GI surgeon. So I attribute so much of my career to being inspired by him. He had a profound influence on my career.
Honestly, that's incredible to hear that kind of journey and the kind of different experiences you've had at different hospitals, etc. Was it always that you knew you were going to go down this kind of humanitarian path in the future? Not really. I mean,
no. I mean, it's been a massively important part of my life, and a terribly important part of my life. But no, it wasn't planned at all. I've always been interested in doing different things.
Yeah.
And it was real serendipity. Back in 2005 or 6, I think it was, one of my retired colleagues from Oxford, a chap called Nick Dudley, who was a great friend and in many ways a great mentor from the humanitarian work. He had been out in Jerusalem at Al-Quds University in Abu Dis. He'd been invited out to help, I think, with some of the medical student exams. He'd retired as a surgeon, and had enjoyed it. And I bumped into him at a dinner at one of the college dinners in Oxford, and he said, "Oh, they want me to go and do some teaching there. Do you want to come?" So I said, "Well, yeah." And not because I knew much about Palestine, I really didn't, but I wanted to do something different. And so I went out there. There's a few of us went out, and I just immediately fell in love with Palestine, fell in love with the people there, and started going back. And then I was in 2010, someone said, "Do you want to go into Gaza?" I said, "Yes," for the same reasons, and fell in love with Gaza, fell in love with the people there. So it was none of it was planned. It just happened, but it was a wonderful thing that happened to me.
Amazing. So we will, of course, go into the work you've done in Gaza and how you met Tareq as well. But I want our viewers to get a slightly better grasp of the kind of stuff you do. I think we take it for granted as medics that you're an upper GI surgeon. What does that actually mean for those who are not medically literate? What kind of things do you see day to day? And also you've got quite an extensive research background. What kind of things have you kind of done before you started your humanitarian work?
So I was appointed as a consultant surgeon in Oxford in 1997, and I was appointed to set up a service for treating esophageal and gastric cancer. So I trained as a general surgeon, and of course, the degree of subspecialization has massively increased in the last few decades. But when I started my training in surgery, probably in 1990, everyone was general surgeons, and you did everything. And my great mentor, Bill Owen, who I've spoken to you about, did everything. He did do a lot of esophageal work, but he did endocrine surgery, he did aortic surgery, he did everything really. But his great love was esophageal surgery. So I learned a lot of that from him. But I had a very broad training in general surgery. But because of my great mentor, I think my great love was esophageal surgery. And at that stage, so we're talking about back in the mid-90s, it was the outcomes weren't great from esophageal surgery. It was very, very high risk surgery. But that appealed to me. I loved challenges, and I had great training in it. And I'd gone to Australia for 17 months training. And I came back, and I was I knew I had about a year and a half of my training left. So I was beginning to think about where I wanted to end up. And I'd done part of my medical training. I was a student in Oxford.
Yeah.
So I thought, God, I'd always thought Oxford would be lovely to return to. And I happened to be in the right place at the right time. They advertised for a job when I was ready for a job. The job was to set up a service for providing esophagogastric cancer surgery. And it fitted the bill. It came at the earliest possible time for me. I was just 35, so quite early on. And I applied for the job and luckily got it. So my role then was to set up esophagogastric cancer surgery. There was very little of it being done in Oxford. And that first 6, 7, 8 years were just incredibly busy. I built up a big referral service very rapidly, but they were very slow in giving me colleagues. So
I can imagine, and I think that's it's an incredible journey you've had, and I'm really looking forward for us to get into some of that humanitarian work as well post 2010. I think before we do get there, I think it'd be good to also bring in our other guest, Tareq, and if you can perhaps as well give us a bit of an introduction to yourself for the viewers. Tell us a bit about who you are, what your journey is, having actually been in Gaza up until quite recently, and actually being a medical student there, etc. I think it would be nice to hear a bit about your story.
Thank you, Zayn and Ali. Thank you for having us today. My name is Tareq AbdalJawwad. I'm Palestinian from Gaza. I've lived in Gaza all my life until I left in January 2024, 3 months into the current genocide in Gaza. I'm a medical student there at the Al-Azhar University in Gaza. I just finished my 5th year, and I've qualified now to move into my final year, which I'm doing now as a visiting student at the University of Oxford. I'm actually involved for many years now. I've been involved in medical education and research and surgical education work. Over the past 5 years, I've had just over 15 positions in several organizations in medical education and research. I've organized about 35 projects benefiting over 1,000 medical students all over Palestine, one of which is Oxford, actually, with whom I've been working for about just under 4 years now, and I'll be running for director also for the next few weeks.
We will get onto Oxfam in a second. I do want to expand on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Carry on,
they're doing an amazing work. They've been expanding their work massively, and they're currently having some projects running on the ground in Oxford. And so all over these years, I've been involved in many organizations, and I've been always trying to benefit and expand the benefit of research and medical education across the 2 medical schools in Gaza. And we've been doing some really good work. And we're expanding it as well.
Honestly, it sounds really, really impressive. I mean, the amount of organizations.
Are you thinking back to your 5th year?
Exactly.
You are seriously
the comparison there,
really accomplished.
Time spent in university. Yeah. I think it would be great to hear a bit more about that as well, and also about then what changed in your journey. Of course, in January 2024, you came. Was it a simple, straightforward journey to UK, or how did that manifest itself?
So as I said before, I've lived in Gaza all my life. I used to live only 700 meters west to the eastern border with the occupied Palestinian territories. And 700 meters is not that much, to be honest. We've always had like an air balloon, a huge air balloon for surveillance that's just across our house. And that actually made our life not very easy. It's not only about surveillance, but it's also about the location. Although I loved where we lived, where we used to live in Gaza, it has a very beautiful green scenery, quiet, very nice walk to the mosque as well. But I do not remember a year in my life where I had not left our house, evacuated our house because of bombing. Every year of my life, at least, we've left 5-6 times because of bombings, wars, and so on. And our house always, and every single time, it gets bombed, burned, destroyed, and so on. I remember in 2006, we woke up in the morning, and we had 2 Israeli tanks and a bulldozer into our house, into the front yard in the backyard of our house, destroying our trees and so on. And we woke up on the house shaking because the bulldozer was just hitting the main corner of the house. And my grandmother went outside shaking like a white cloth for them to say that there are people inside. And they kept us in a room for 3 days without food or water, with my paraplegic grandfather, who they did not even approve to give him water or food at that time. And they had my father and my only uncle stripped of their clothes on the ground at the front yard. So that was just one example. And the example that I remember the most when I was young, I was only like 6 years old. And that was actually my life from that perspective, every year of my life, living in that area, that
it's
beautiful area in Gaza.
It's difficult to hear stories. I'm sure it's incredibly difficult to tell those stories as well. I think what's really important, especially for our viewers to hear from that story, is that you didn't start by saying in 2023 or in 2024.
No, yeah.
In 2006 is the story you're saying. Yeah. You're saying every year of your life, this is going on. This isn't, and this is, of course, a reminder. This didn't all start in 2023. And on top of that as well, something that's often overlooked when we talk about Palestine and Gaza and West Bank, and also Professor Maynard, you mentioned about how you fell in love with the people, the culture. Often when we talk about the area of Palestine or Gaza, it's often in the sense of death and destruction. Yeah. That's all that's ever referred to, because that's all there ever is that we hear from this area. But there's a whole a people, a history, a culture that is overlooked, a beautiful history and culture of all the Abrahamic faiths, of people of all faiths and none in that jewel of the world. I'm sorry to interrupt your story there, but I just think it's such an important point for us to
and for our viewers to realize that someone of your age will have lived through 4 or 5 full-scale invasions of Gaza. And these things that are really inhumanely referred to as the mowing of the grass, these relatively frequent coming in and killing of thousands of Palestinians well before 2023. People like yourself, myself, Zayn, will have had our eye on these things for a few years, but I'm sure a lot of our viewers, listeners, and a lot of people worldwide will have been drawn to Gaza in the last 18 months. And so this idea that a genocide began in 2023 and escalated is not, it's quite lost on people. So can you just tell us a little bit about, I know you've given us one story, but tell us a little bit about what it was like in Gaza in the, the relatively peaceful times. And I'd like to hear from Professor Maynard after you said you fell in love with Gaza. Just give us a picture of what you fell in love with, what kind of experiences you had when you first came. And if you had experiences on the other side of the border as well, how they compared or contrasted as well. It'd be very good to hear.
Yeah, actually, Professor Maynard has a very nice presentation where he talked about the normal Gaza before 2023. And the Gaza has never been normal. You can check one of Dr. Nick's talks before where he very explicitly explained that. So in Gaza, we've been under blockade since 2006, 2005. And since during that blockade, electricity was the maximum we got of electricity, and that was that the best days was about 8 hours a day. Gas also was minimal. Water is minimal. Access to transportation, access to travel, free travel is very, very minimal, because we have only 2 borders where we can travel as civilians, and the northern border is controlled by the Israeli government and the occupation government, and also the southern border controlled by the Egyptian government. And so it's like literally an open air prison, as you always hear. it's always been difficult to access not good quality education. We have good quality education, as you know, in Gaza. The Gaza population is the most educated population per capita in the world. My mother has a PhD. My father is founded a surgery department at a public aid hospital, and so we have good quality education, but not from the resources that we have, but from the dedication, the perseverance that
Just the strength of the people.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the key. Not because if we have enough resources and if we have equal resources as other people in other countries, you would have seen Gaza at another scale. And in the past 2 years before 2023, Gaza has went up in a huge scale of development in many sectors. That's why also another reason why they are wiping it from the ground now, because they have seen Gaza moving on a huge scale. So from electricity, water, like basic life necessities. I've been using internet on batteries for my studies and my meetings. As I said, I've been involved in over 35 projects, and many of these projects were during the pandemic of COVID-19. And during that time, the electricity was about 4 hours a day only during that time. So how did I even get to internet, charge my laptop? That was really, really difficult. I relied on batteries, charging batteries from now and then. I've been in more than 500 webinars during the pandemic. That was a struggle with the internet. That's just one of the simplest things to talk about, internet and laptop charging. So
the dedication there is incredible, especially when we contrast with some of these topics are alien to the viewers we have in this country, because the privilege you have of living in a country where you don't have to worry about electricity, going out in the middle of the day and lacking water and food and being woken up in the middle of the night with a bulldozer at your door. I think also, like Ali mentioned, I think it would be good to hear from yourself, Professor Maynard, about the experiences you saw in Gaza as well, but particularly at first we want to talk about what made you fall in love with the Palestinian people and the Palestinian culture in the first place.
It's the people. I mean, it's particularly the people. It's the culture as well as the land, but it's the people more than anything else. And just to echo what Tareq has said, the world's has woken up to the existence of Gaza in the last 2 years. Most people 2 years ago would have known very little about Gaza, wouldn't know where it is, and everyone knows a lot about Gaza now. And of course, there's been a lot of propaganda, a lot of myths being spread maliciously about the history of Gaza, including the suggestion that it started on October the 7th. And of course, as we've heard from Tareq, of course it didn't start on October the 7th. It started long before that. And what I have witnessed in all my years going to Gaza, and as Tareq said, when I talk about it, I deliberately talk about normal Gaza, not because it's normal. Of course, it's not normal. It's by any standard in the rest of the world, it's not at all normal. But I talk about what was normal for the Gazan population and what people were used to living there, what people like me who've been visiting for many years were used to, and it was far from normal. They've been occupied for many, many years. They've been blockaded. They've been imprisoned. We talk now about food insecurity, water insecurity, fuel insecurity, electricity. That all exists before. It's now much, much worse. Malnutrition existed before then because they've been deprived of the ability to lead anything resembling a normal life. In all the trips I've been to Gaza since 2010, every single trip I have witnessed aerial bombardment, without exception. I've seen or heard aerial bombardment while I've been there. It's a way of life for my Gazan friends. I remember when I was there in May 2023, so 7 months before the October the 7th, I was there in what was the standard Gaza we're all used to, and I'd gone out there for a week of doing cancer surgery, helping develop their cancer services, and we were caught up in the middle of the biggest aerial bombardment they'd had for about 2 years. I mean, minute compared to what's been going on since then, but massive for then. And there was a lockdown, there was a curfew, no one could go on the streets. We were confined to our hotel. We couldn't go to the hospital. And we were eventually evacuated by the United Nations. But we had a sort of we were right in the centre of this massive bombardment going on, which was pretty nerve-wracking. But we got lots of phone calls from Gaza friends, and they kept saying, "We're so worried about you. We're so worried about you." And I sort of say, why are you worried about us? We're going to get out. We know the United Nations are going to evacuate us. You're stuck here, but you're worried about us. And that is the whole theme. They are the most generous, beautiful people I've ever known in my life. They care so much, and I came out of Gaza just a few weeks ago. The generosity, the care they give us is just limitless, and yet they are the ones who are in far more danger, have such a persecuted life compared to us, but they just care deeply about us. So I guess it comes back to what I was saying earlier. They have had such a difficult life forced upon them by the Israeli occupation, by the siege, the apartheid system, by the silence of the rest of the world. And yet, despite that, they remain the most beautiful, generous people I've ever come across in my life. And that is what made me fall in love with the place. And that is what draws me back all the time. It's the wonderful, wonderful people there.
Honestly, it's incredible to hear that of people so oppressed to be reacting in such a way to still have that care and thinking about, no, we're worried about you, we're caring about you. It's incredible to hear the strength and dedication of a people like that. I think we've opened up that conversation a bit about now your time in Gaza and your experiences there. I think, especially for the viewers, it'd be nice to hear a bit about the actual medical side of things that you had in Gaza. So the humanitarian work you've been doing there over your many trips, and more particularly your more recent trips. What, if you're okay with sharing some of the experiences, what kind of things did you see there? What kind of things do you want to tell the world? This is what is going on right now in Gaza.
So, shall I briefly talk about my pre-October the 7th?
Yes, I think it'll be good to start there, and then we'll
move on to some of the more horrible things. So I guess prior to October the 7th, I'd had two, in many ways, separate roles in Gaza. When I first went in 2010, and that was really to in many ways to set up a teaching program. It wasn't anything like as formal as that initially. I was invited out, and we did some teaching of medical students on that first trip. And we set up a regular visit every year since then of taking Oxford doctors, meant some of whom had left Oxford, but everyone had a core link to Oxford, either existing Oxford consultants or GPs or had trained in Oxford. And it was initially set up and run by my great friend and mentor, Nick Dudley, who very sadly passed away quite a few years ago. And then fairly quickly, I took over the organisation of that. So we took a group of doctors, a mixture of surgeons, physicians, obstetricians, paediatricians, to Gaza, usually up to about 12 of us, and every year we'd go there, teach final year medical students at Islamic University of Gaza and as often as we could, Al-Azhar University as well. And that was just a wonderful week. We were there for 10 days. It was very busy, teaching on the wards in the morning, basic clinical skills, history taking, examination skills, and then the afternoon was all OSCE-type scenarios in the university, clinical stations. And then they'd give us a lot of magnificent food all the time, and I'd then be told off by my wife for putting on weight every time I was out there. And we just had a glorious time. And it was initially it was very difficult recruiting people to go out there because they thought Gaza's too dangerous. Yeah. But by when I was planning, organising our November 2023 trip, which for obvious reasons didn't happen, I had a queue of about 30 people wanting to come, and I was really struggling working out how I could reduce it to 12 people. Anyway, so and that reflects the fact that everyone I've ever known I've taken to Gaza, who've been to Gaza, just falls in love with the place and wants to go back. I also have been heavily involved with medical aid for Palestinians. And in more recent years, prior to October 2023, I was helping the Gazan healthcare system develop, in the broader sense, their cancer surgical services. And the MAP philosophy, which is a wonderful philosophy, and I cannot speak highly enough of medical aid for Palestinians. The MAP philosophy has been very much working with the Gazan healthcare infrastructure, the people there, and teaching and transference of skills. It's never been about someone like me going in and doing a big operation and leaving it again, because then it's about teaching transference of skills and working with the local healthcare population. So we were doing that, and I was helping develop cancer services. And then more recent, and that was challenging. It was very enjoyable, but very challenging, because the resources, even prior to October the 7th, were very limited. We never had all the energy devices, the fancy toys we use in the operating theatres over here, nothing like that. And you work with what you have, and you work with wonderfully talented healthcare workers over there. And it in many ways reminds you of the core values of what being a doctor is all about.
Yeah.
It's been a constant reminder, and particularly so since October the 7th. So
I do want to fast forward to October 7th.
Yeah.
I actually wanted to build on something you said, just for, again, the sake of our viewers, many of whom will not know the extent to which materials and food supplies were restricted from entering Gaza prior to October 7th. And there's a very interesting, I think it was WikiLeaks document that I read more than a decade ago, which said that the Israeli government had calculated the minimum calorie requirement for the people of Gaza to survive. So not to thrive, not to be in a position where they're able to, eat, intake a surplus by any means. And that was the limit of nutrition that was allowed into Gaza. And the same thing they found with things like construction materials, healthcare equipment, like you said. So way back, we're talking since, the blockade in 2006, there has been a heavy restriction. And despite that restriction, you still have celebrated Palestinian medics, academics, poets, and it's a testament to a culture that is really, really resilient and is able to thrive academically and intellectually and creatively despite those boundaries. But I just wanted to fast forward a bit to your work more recently, and many of our viewers will have seen you on various channels talking about the systematic destruction of healthcare infrastructure. Can you speak to us a bit about that, and how there is, without doubt, not an accidental, but a systematic, deliberate targeting of medical infrastructure? And then if you would be able to share some of the stories that you saw in the last 2 odd years.
Yeah, I mean, so I've had 3 trips out to Gaza since October the 7th, 2023. And of course, was at Al-Aqsa Hospital with Tareq on my first trip. And I'll certainly talk about my experience. I think Tareq will add massive value, because he's lived it and worked as a medical student in the emergency rooms there. But yes, when my first trip post October the 7th was we arrived in Gaza on December the 26th. We were meant to arrive on Christmas Day, but it took so long getting through the militarized northern Sinai, the Egyptian military, that we couldn't get in time. And I thought I'd be prepared for it, because I know Gaza well, because I was talking to friends and colleagues out there about almost daily since October 7th, but it was far, far worse than I'd imagined. And there were many devastating things, but the witnessing of the deliberate, and it was clearly deliberate, and we'll talk about why and everything, the deliberate destruction of the infrastructure, the healthcare and the doctors and nurses there. And I think what I have seen relentlessly in the last nearly 2 years, and what my colleagues who've been out there with me have seen, we've all seen the deliberate dismantling, the deliberate targeting of hospitals, the whole infrastructure of the healthcare system, and the deliberate targeting, killing illegal detention, torturing of healthcare workers. And you know the figures. I mean, over 1,500 healthcare workers have been killed. Some of them very clearly executed. And I use that word, I don't use that word lightly, but executed, people who've been discovered afterwards with their hands handcuffed behind their back and bullets in their heads.
I think we've all seen images from the Channel 4 documentary as well. You see pictures of doctors, healthcare workers being taken out on zip ties, being
and executed. And
exactly.
you know, friends of mine, and Tareq will know many of them as well. Every single hospital has been attacked. NASA Hospital, where I've been working most recently, is the only decent sized hospital left functioning, and that's only partly functioning. The whole infrastructure of these hospitals working has been, the Israeli forces have tried to dismantle them. And again, they're not just bombing hospitals, they're going in and they're dismantling the whole apparatus. You know, what they did in Shifa Hospital, they went and destroyed all the laboratories. They went and destroyed the scanners. You know, a great friend of mine, James Smith, who's an emergency doctor who's been out there, has got a photograph of the ultrasound machines with the cables have been severed to make them unusable. They went and destroyed every single dialysis machine in Shifa Hospital, the water supplies, the gas supplies, the waste disposal systems. So this is much more than just bombing hospitals because they say there are Hamas militants in them. I mean, those sort of claims there's never been any credible or verifiable evidence put forward. And it's much more about fundamentally dismantling the whole healthcare infrastructure. And they've deliberately targeted healthcare workers. We've talked about people who've been executed. We know about some of the really iconic doctors there that we know. Again, Tareq will know better than me, who've been deliberately abducted, illegally detained, tortured, killed in detention. Friends of mine have been killed. I've taken detailed testimonies from friends who've been in Israeli prisons for 60, 70 days and described to me, I've seen their scars of how they were tortured every single day. So I've witnessed this with my own eyes. I'm very careful when I talk about these things to talk about what I have seen, what I've seen with my own eyes. And on my most recent trip, I witnessed, I saw many young teenage boys who'd been deliberately shot by Israeli soldiers at the GHF. I can't even bear to say the term, what it stands for, food distribution points. Deliberate, it was almost like target practice of different body parts. So what I've witnessed has been indescribably awful, and at every single stage, clear evidence to me of war crimes, of genocide, of ethnic cleansing.
So, I mean, to call it killing is such an understatement. It's unbelievable. It's not killing, it's devastation. It's a strategy of destruction. It's a genocide, as you mentioned. It's not, if you target doctors and nurses, who's going to heal the population? You target the hospital infrastructure, make it so it can't be rebuilt. You target the roads, they can't.
As well. The ambulances, and delayed strikes on ambulances and healthcare first responders.
Absolutely. And deliberately targeting the access roads to the hospitals. So the
target
first
the roads,
can't get there.
They can't travel there.
And it is a very, very deliberate attempt to destroy the whole infrastructure of living in Gaza. And the target of the hospital is very clearly to make, I was struck when I arrived at Al-Aqsa Hospital in December 2023 when you were there, and I was I'd never seen overcrowding like this. I had never seen such a dense concentration of people in one space. It was just...
So this is 2.5 months in. We're now almost 2 years in.
Yeah.
So imagine the scale we're talking about here.
Absolutely. But I think there must have been 20,000 people living in Al-Aqsa Hospital.
Yeah, with the displaced people.
With
maybe
all,
10,000. Yeah,
maybe
so
10,000. But the displaced people have been moved down, and they go to hospitals because their place is a sanctuary, because they know they're going to need healthcare. They think they'll be a place of safety. Of course, they're not, because the Israelis are targeting. But they go there as a place of sanctuary. And this, I think, is behind the deliberate targeting of hospitals, because they say, if we destroy the hospitals, if we dismantle them, people will then leave, because they will migrate. They'll go to other places where there are hospitals. Yeah. And this has been part of the destruction of living, the whole infrastructure of living.
And I think it will be good to go into more of that. I want to also bring Tareq in, because like you mentioned, it's systematic destruction. And if we go beyond the healthcare infrastructure as well, of course, if you then target the journalists who's going to report on what's going on, you target the aid workers who's going to provide aid. I think it will be really good as well now, because we brought it in, Tareq, your experiences yourself as actually a Palestinian from Gaza in the medical side of things. So obviously, Professor Maynard has opened up to his experiences. I think it would be really good to hear from what you've seen on your end, starting from October 23. But of course, you mentioned there was a lot of work you've done before that as well. So it'd be good to hear.
So in the morning of October the 7th, I had slept on my laptop. I had fallen asleep on my laptop that night and woke up 6:15 in the morning with rockets over our house, flying over our house. And I just sat there, said Shahada, and just sat there for 5 minutes. And then I left my room. I saw my mother just taking my younger brother out, and my father as well, looking from the windows. And 15 minutes, and we left with 2 plastic bags until now. So that's how we left our house. And then we went to the middle area, the more to the west, in the middle area of Gaza, just close to the Al-Aqsa Hospital. And about a few days later, I started going to Al-Aqsa Hospital. And because of the road from where we were displaced and to the hospital, it was like only maximum 20 minutes walk. But every minute that you walk in the streets, you are targeted. You can be killed anytime. You can be killed and bombarded any minute with surveillance airplanes. And so that what I did is that I used to go to the hospital for 2 full days or 3 full days, and then come back to where we were displaced to sleep half a day, because I did not have a place to sleep in the hospital. So 3 days and half a day out, and 2 days in, half a day out, and so on. And I remember my first day very, very well, because I just met my mentor in the emergency department, who was my friend and my relative, and he was just appointed as the lead of the emergency department a few months before the war, before the genocide started. And I just stuck with him for the whole duration that I worked there for 3 months. And on my first day, my first few hours, him and I, we went to the tent. We had a tent where the martyrs come, where the people who were already killed, they come with the ambulance piled up in an ambulance, and they don't even come to the emergency department to be announced dead. They go to the tent of the martyrs immediately. And my first few hours in that shift, in my first shift, I went to the tent with my mentor, Abdul, and then we had 1 plastic bag, and we had counted only body parts in it. We counted brains, we counted ears, we counted hands, as well as eyes. And the total number was just estimated, as my mentor estimated, was about 15. And just in 1 plastic bag, just counted body parts. And many of them were children body parts, because were very, very small body parts. And that was my first day in that shift. That was on the 16th of October, 2023. On the 16th of October, on the 15th of October 2023, after the Fajr prayer, we were awake and we heard a very heavy bombing nearby. And about 1 p.m., my sister's husband, he had received a call, and one of the neighbors, and he said that was your sister's house. And his sister was married with about 4 or 5 children. The oldest was 18 years old. The youngest was my niece's friend in kindergarten. She was only 4 years old. And she was the only blonde girl in their house. And they had my sister's husband's sister. She was married in her husband's family house. It was 4 floors. And as you know, in Gaza, we have our house is full of concrete. We don't have houses of wood and so on. So when my sister's husband received the call, we rushed to the house. Like that was about 10 hours later than after the bombing, and we saw the 4 floors compiled up, and we only saw like the last floor ceiling only on the ground, and everything beneath it is dust. And we just started digging up. No ambulances came up. No firefighters. No like civil defense staff came up. Because there was no equipment, and that was only on the 15th of October. And from the 50 members of the family, we only took out the ring finger of my sister's husband's sister, and my sister recognized this finger because she bought that ring with her husband's sister before the genocide. And we dug the scalp of the only blonde girl of the family. We only dug the scalp of her, so that there was only like a blonde hair just next to the finger. So I suppose she was with her mother in the kitchen or something. And we recognized these two, they were for these two people, only from the ring and the blonde, the color of the hair. And we also got the head of the grandfather from one of the neighbors got the head because it flew out from the bombing. So only these 3 body parts and items were buried from out of all 50 members of the family. That was 15th of October. 16th of October, I went to the hospital, counted body parts in the tent as well. 17th of October, when Al Ahli Hospital was bombed, I was, at the time that Al Ahli Hospital was bombed, I was suturing my professor's head because he was targeted in his house. He's a professor of pathology. He taught me in medical school. And he came with his family, all of them injured, and he had his head open, and was suturing him and cleaning his scalp, and before he went to have a CT scan. My father was calling me, and after I was done suturing him, I picked up the phone, and my father told me that they bombed Al Ahli Hospital, over 1,000 dead and injured, and they are threatening to bomb Al Aqsa Hospital, so come back now. But I could not leave at that moment, so I went back to where we were displaced about 5 or 6 hours later, and I was told off really heavily by my father then. And I couldn't go back to the hospital, Al Aqsa Hospital, for 2 days because it was also threatened to be bombed like Al Ahli Hospital. Because the sanctuary status of hospital at the night when Al Ahli Hospital was bombed, this sanctuary status was done, it ended. And people who were seeking refuge, as Dr. Nick said, in hospitals, they did not feel safe at all from the moment that Al Ahli Hospital was bombed.
There were no red lines that weren't crossed.
And I could not believe it that the night of Al Ahli Hospital, we thought that was the end of it. We thought, I know for sure that was the end of it, and I didn't go back to the hospital, both because my father did not let me, and also because we thought that this was the end of it.